With that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Lazo. Dr. Lazo, thank you for joining us this evening.
Yeah, thanks for having us and me to present on this subject, this topic. So I am Dr. Lazo. My first name is George Alex, so you're welcome to call me George or Alex. I go by both. I am actually one of the psychologists, clinicians at Children's Health Council, and I provide therapy services to families, particularly kids age range 0 to college age, actually, all the way up to about 24 is usually where our cutoff is before we pass them on to adult services. And I also do a few other things. I supervise our psychology trainees who are getting trained and educated in psychology, clinical psychology. And also, I do a lot of work with parents and caregivers and providing them support around concerns related to ADHD or autism, or just any kind of support to their children and adolescents. Um, the specialties I usually work with range from concerns related to ADHD and other neurocognitive disorders, as well as mood, such as anxiety and depression, and also some behavioral concerns. I'll tell you a little bit about Children's Health Council. Our overall vision as an organization is really to support the potential of every child and adolescent, as well as young adults at every stage, whether it's related to education and academics, and beyond. So, supporting relationships in social functioning, and just individual potentials. Our mission is to transform lives through support in ways that our clients and families seek support, and our services are impacted by our values in culturally responsive, quality learning and mental health services. And our communities are from diverse backgrounds. And values that our organization really prioritizes is having staff and clinicians that have expertise in the concerns that are brought to CHC, and making sure that we support families and young people in their potential. Compassion, making sure that we have empathy and develop trust with our families and communities through making genuine connections. We also value connecting with the community as we are tonight. Schools, other organizations, and of course individuals and families in the community. Lastly, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging as part of a one community is very important to us. We do a lot of work in maintaining values in diversity and equity within our organization and with the communities that we work with. Next slide. We have several locations. I am particularly a clinician at our Palo Alto office, where we have our clinical services, our two schools that are specialized in addressing concerns related to things like dyslexia or ADHD or other cognitive challenges. And we also have our Schwab Learning Center, which is a resource for high school and college students. We also have CHC Ravenswood in East Palo Alto, San Jose office, and our EBC San Jose office, which is our Esther B. Clark School. All right. So jumping into the topic of tonight, I'm really glad that you are here to learn more about ADHD and to understand what this is in general. I do have to say that while I am a trained and licensed clinician that is qualified to diagnose, I do not intend for this presentation to put pressure on parents, families, caregivers to diagnose your own children or members of your family. I simply want to provide um, information so that you feel well informed to make next steps should you have any concerns or if you just have questions about what this is, even if you're not necessarily seeing concerns. So I don't expect you to be able to diagnose or confirm that any concerns you have are actually ADHD. I would encourage you to, if you do have concerns, to seek the support of your pediatrician or medical providers, seeking organizations like CHC, where they could provide diagnostic services and therapies and support, or your school and having conversations with staff and teachers at your school for concerns that you might have. All right, so what this presentation is about is it comes down to what ADHD is and what it isn't. So I am going to talk about, how ADHD shows up at different stages in young lives, in childhood, in teenage years or adolescence, and in high school or in college. And I'll share common myths about what we might hear in media or in other resources that might be talking about ADHD. And understanding, my hope is that you understand ADHD a little more beyond what is stereotypical or what you see as a generalized understanding of ADHD. Also recognizing how symptoms change with age. So what symptoms might look like in childhood and how different they might show up in adolescence. Also providing, some insight into what could be supportive for children, both at home and at school. Because, as you'll probably hear me say again, this does have to show up in more than just one place. If it's showing up in one place but not in others, there might be other reasons why that's happening. But in order to receive an actual ADHD diagnosis, it does have to show up in several different settings, like school or home. And I would like to spend some time separating the facts from um, uh, ideas that are not true. Next slide. So goals for today or tonight is by the end of this talk, I hope that parents and caregivers and families will better understand what ADHD is, what it is not, how ADHD looks different at each age, why it can be misunderstood as something else, not ADHD, common myths about it, and ways families can support children effectively. Next slide. So we'll start with what ADHD is, and it's simply a definition that I developed from the research and general expertise around ADHD. So ADHD, the letters stand for, it's an acronym for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. It is categorized as a neurodevelopmental condition that impacts how individuals regulate their attention, their control, regulate control impulses, which is like self-control or having an idea and wanting to do it and not really having control over that. And it also affects activity levels, maybe being high energy and actually being low energy because of a lot of distress that they might be experiencing from the impact of ADHD. And lastly, executive functioning is impacted. I'd like to actually share a little bit more about executive functioning. We can keep it on this slide. So executive functioning is often called the brain's management system. So it's the part of the brain that is able to manage memory, adaptability and flexibility. So your ability to adjust to new situations and think outside of the box if there's a solution that isn't very clear. And it also involves self-control. So your ability to manage your emotions and your behaviors and to control impulses when there's a need to stay focused. Key skills supported. So in executive functioning, someone who is able to function with these skills are able to plan and prioritize tasks. So they set a goal and then they create a plan as to how to achieve that goal. And then another skill is ability to organize. So you keep track of information and materials. So you organize like your homework, you put your papers down, and you prepare for starting your homework. Task initiation, being able to start the task and not avoiding it or procrastinating. Time management is also a skill, so being able to finish the task in an appropriate amount of time. Lastly, emotional regulation is an executive functioning skill. It helps when you are able to emotionally regulate, you control your impulses and manage any frustrations, and you're able to use a solution to move forward. Next slide. So ADHD is based on it is rooted in the brain. So the brain means brain-based means that it's there is a difference in the brain that is impacting the ability to manage attention and impulsivity. It is real. It is something that we believe and that research shows is a condition and a problem. It is common. It shows up at all ages and across, uh, um, different genders, and so it's not just um, unique to a specific people. And it is treatable. So there are supports and treatments that are found to help with people who have been diagnosed with ADHD. Next slide. ADHD is not simply laziness. So it's not just a child who just doesn't have the energy or doesn't care to do anything. It's not low intelligence. It has nothing to do with your ability to reach your potential of smartness. What I usually say, it has nothing to do with smarts. It has everything to do with your ability to take in information and use that information to accomplish tasks and manage life. It is not something that children outgrow. If they're diagnosed with ADHD, unless they were misdiagnosed, they will likely have challenges that they can definitely overcome with support and learn to navigate life with ADHD. It isn't a lack of discipline, so it's not that people around them are just letting them do whatever they want. It's not related to having bad structure around them. It's not caused by bad parenting. Parents cannot cause their children to have ADHD. It isn't a lack of motivation. It's not that they aren't motivated. It's that there's something that's keeping them from being motivated. And it's not just your child being energetic or having a lot of energy. There's more to it than just having high energy. Next slide. Um, so what I do want to say is that children with ADHD often want to do well. they tend to try as hard as they can, and then because of the challenges that are related to ADHD, they become helpless and they feel like, well, what's the point? Because, I can't do it no matter how hard I try. And difficulty does not equal unwillingness. So just because they're having difficulties doesn't mean that they're unwilling to try. Um, the core symptom areas are categorized into three main symptoms, or three main categories of symptoms. So ADHD can be diagnosed with inattention, so they're having difficulties keeping their focus. They're also having challenges with being distracted by things. When they're trying to work on things, they're easily distracted. Oh, there's a bird outside, or oh, a noise happened. They do tend to exhibit forgetfulness, being disorganized, and losing their materials. Hyperactivity looks like a lot of movement, just fidgeting and moving around. Restlessness, like they just can't sit, they feel like they want to do something. They talk a lot, they blurt out, like, oh, in class they're calling out answers when they're not supposed to. And then impulsivity is wanting to interrupt. When you're talking to someone, they come up to you and they just say it. They can't really practice that self-control and plan to share things. Blurting out, acting before thinking, and difficulty waiting. Next slide. Um, so ADHD, as I said, shows up across stages of early life and into adulthood. And it does not always look the same at every age. So we have found that ADHD can show up as early as preschool years, 3, 4 years old. And uh, while this isn't exactly everything that is identified for each age, but this is a general sense of what might be a concern. So in preschool years, early school years, you see a lot of high movement, high impulsivity is more obvious. So they're just running around, having difficulty controlling their energy and their movement, and they're doing a lot of things without thinking. Next, we find the elementary school years, which is beginning to show some challenges with school demands and level of difficulty in school as they go from grade to grade. And you start to see some attention challenges and difficulties. In teenage years and adolescence, you start to see internal restlessness and executive functioning challenges. So as you get older, you have to practice executive functioning more often because you have a lot more tasks as a high schooler, like a lot of different homeworks, different classes. So you start to see the organizational and planning and task completion be a real challenge. Organization and emotional regulation difficulties is in the adulthood stage. So you start to see a lot of, what becomes more obvious is a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression because of helplessness, not being able to accomplish the things that they want to accomplish. Of course, a lot of this can show up at different stages, but these are some of the main things that show up at these ages. Next slide. So I'll go into each stage because, I'm sure there's families here who have children at different ages. So this is how ADHD might look in young children, preschool age. So early school age. Possible signs. Some might not have this. Some children might have all of this. And some might be more complex. So possible signs could be constant motion, difficulty sitting for story time or for meals. They just want to get up and run around the table, or they can't sit still. Frequency with climbing and risk taking. So kind of not really thinking about the possibility of danger or risks. Short attention span beyond peers. So they, kids at this age, they're still learning how to hold their focus and their attention. But if there's a difference between average peers in their classroom, it might show up as like, oh, this child has a shorter attention span than other kids. Big emotional reactions. So, getting upset about things that may seem pretty small to you, but to them, they express emotions in tantrums and meltdowns, and it can appear explosive. And then difficulty with transitions, having a hard time getting ready for school, always late, or not being able to find the things they need for bedtime, or just having a real difficult time going from one thing to the next. Next slide. So what's important is many young children are active, as I said. It's not necessarily um, that they might have ADHD. It's just they're learning how to regulate their emotions. So they're pretty young. So ADHD in particular involves symptoms that are more intense. So if a kid, is playing and they have so much energy and they're laughing because they're just happy, and then you say, oh, okay, now it's time to clean up. And they say, okay. Whereas ADHD kids are, kids with ADHD tend to get really upset because they have to finish, and it shows up every time. It's a challenge to get them to move on to a next task. And what I usually have a conversation with families is that in order for a diagnosis to be determined, we do have to see impairment. We do have to see that the child is really struggling in school, at home, and it's really causing distress to this child. Next slide. Okay, now elementary age, which is from kindergarten to fifth or sixth grade, depending on when middle school begins. Um, so what you may notice as parents or caregivers or families is you're having a lot of conflict around homework. They don't want to do their homework, or they're losing their stuff. They don't remember where they put it, and they can't find it, or it wasn't. They thought it was one place and it's not there. Difficulty following directions. So you give them directions. Please go brush your teeth. Go get your put your pajamas on, and then get in bed, but they end up downstairs watching TV. So they have a hard time following directions. They get emotionally frustrated, so they become easily frustrated when they're trying to accomplish a task. Social challenges with peers. This is a big one. When they begin to show problems and they feel like they're not getting the help or the support, or they're being blamed for their behaviors, they start to feel isolated, and they start to feel like they're different, or they feel like they're always causing problems, and their peers either, you know, don't want to be around them, or their peers don't understand. What teachers may observe is incomplete work. So they're turning in work that is kind of rushed, or they didn't follow the directions. They're calling out but without raising their hand, or they're, talking when they shouldn't be. They're easily distracted. Their teacher says, okay, put away your materials, but they're, focused on finishing something, and they don't necessarily take in what the teacher is instructing them to do. Or they have trouble staying seated. So they're getting up, or they're rocking back in their chair, or they're, pounding their feet under the desk. So they're having a real hard time regulating their energy. Next slide. Now, in teenagers, ADHD can begin to kind of start to be difficult to, symptoms of ADHD can begin to seem difficult. So what we do see across many teenagers who are diagnosed with ADHD is chronic procrastination. So they just don't want to do their work until the last minute. Um, they don't manage their time well. Oh, I'll do it later. I'll play video games now. And then they only have 5 minutes before bed to finish their homework. They become emotionally sensitive, so they get easily irritable or irritated. They become sad because they're feeling like things are not going to get better. They have sleep difficulties. They either have a hard time falling asleep, staying asleep, or waking up. Um, they're engaging in risk-taking behaviors, meaning they're like not thinking about the consequences, and they're just impulsively doing things that might be risky. Their academic performance might be inconsistent and having a hard time keeping good grades, and their grades drop, and then they have to work hard to get good grades, and then they drop again. And then ultimately, we do see lower self-esteem because they feel like they don't have control of these challenges. Hyperactivity may still exist, but it might look like internal restlessness. They just feel like anxious, and they have a lot of sort of energy inside, but they're trying to um, control it. They might have racing thoughts. So I've talked about hyperactivity of the mind, where they just have so many thoughts going on in their head, and it's hard having a hard time organizing their thoughts. And then feeling like they always have to be on, meaning they always have to perform well, and they hold it together. And then when they get home, they, blow up or they get upset. So we do see this, that like they hide their challenges at school because they're working so hard to control them. And then that at home, you know, um, they, they show this more. Next slide. So, differences between children. Uh, ADHD does not look the same in every child. It is a little bit of a spectrum. There's there can be a lot of differences. So some children might appear what we call externalizing. So you see it on the outside. They're hyperactive, they're loud, they do whatever, they do what they want without thinking about it. And then some kids might be internalizing, meaning they try to manage this internally. They stay quiet because they don't want to appear or look like they're, shouting out answers, or they're kind of distracted and they're not really listening to the teacher, and they're not really taking in information. They might feel overwhelmed, and they might feel like that they have so much to do, but they just can't do it. Or they become anxious. They fear that, that they may not be able to succeed with this. Because of this, some children are missed or overlooked, and girls are often under or misdiagnosed. What I mean by this is that some kids may not have the outside, you know, uh, symptoms, and so when they go to get support, or when people observe them, they think they look okay. They're not really going through anything. And girls, because of the way our society kind of uh, has stereotypes, so boys they have a lot of energy. Girls, they're more calm, and so girls tend to try to be what other people want them to be. So they say, oh, like in order to be liked by my friends who are girls, I have to be nice and I have to be quiet, which is a challenge because that's a social expectation that people might have, and so they might go underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed for hiding those challenges. Next slide. So this is a bit of a chart or a graph. Executive functioning, it's the hidden part of ADHD. And I discussed this earlier. So executive functioning is basically the ability to manage day-to-day life tasks. I'll use um, washing clothes, for example. So you want to start the laundry. You have to make sure that you have laundry soap. You have to make sure your laundry machine is working, and you have to make sure you separated your clothes. Maybe if you do that from certain colors or different kinds of clothes, then you begin to organize. Which clothes am I going to do first? Then you have to remember the steps. Oh, first you have to put the soap, then you put the clothes, then you close it, then you put the options for how you want to wash them, and then you press start. Then you manage your emotions. You stay calm, you don't get upset or frustrated, you just do it. Um, then you shift your attention to, okay, now I'm gonna wait while my laundry is being washed, and I'm gonna go to do the dishes. And then you monitor your behavior. Oh, I can't forget when I hear the beep or the sound that the laundry's done, I'm finished. And then it's completed. We don't think about how many steps are in just to wash the laundry. And so executive functioning impacted by ADHD can be really uh, impaired because it takes all these skills just to do one task. And I'll take example, um, remembering the steps. If you don't remember the steps, you can have a hard time doing your laundry. And so ADHD can really impair executive functioning and make it really difficult to complete tasks. Next slide. Okay, so common myths. And I just came up with a few common myths. There might be more. This might be ones you've never heard. But these are ones that I have definitely heard or been asked about. So is ADHD caused by too much sugar? Sugar does not cause ADHD. ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder, and it is something that sugar does not have the ability or power to cause. Children with ADHD just need stricter discipline. Yes, all children could benefit from some structure, but ADHD is neurological. So it's not that their school or their families are not providing discipline. It's really something that is coming from the challenges that are happening neurologically. ADHD only affects boys. That is not true. It spans all different genders, so girls often present differently from boys and can be overlooked. Children outgrow, not outthrow ADHD, meaning they are cured. But no, ADHD because it's a neurological disorder. There is no way to change someone's brain. Um, but symptoms do look different in different stages of life. So by the time that they become adults and they've received the support and the treatment, the hope is that they're able to manage ADHD without any challenges that they cannot overcome. They should be able to overcome it with support. Next slide. So, the emotional impact of ADHD. Children with ADHD may experience frequent correction, shame, frustration, anxiety, low confidence, feeling different. And parents might notice their kid act or behave in a way where they're communicating, why can't I do everything what everyone else can? And I think that this is the challenging part is we want to make sure that we're getting support for our kiddos and our adolescents before it turns into these emotional experiences because it doesn't happen right away. It usually develops into these emotional experiences because they have found that they've done everything they can and they still can't um, uh, uh, control or manage these challenges. Next slide. What helps? So, support strategies for families who have children and adolescents who have been diagnosed with ADHD. So, while you can use this with kids, who have not been diagnosed, um, or kids who maybe you have concerns, but there is no diagnosis yet, or kids who have been diagnosed. These are helpful approaches. Having routines, so making sure that every day is similar, getting up for school, getting all their tasks done before school, brushing their teeth, getting ready and going to school, and then coming home, having a time to relax or maybe do their homework, eat dinner, and then play or go to bed. Visual reminders, so checklists, especially for for many grades, you see their school gives a calendar or a planner, and making sure that they can see what they have to do and the tasks they have to finish. Short instructions, so not a lot of steps or words, kind of, okay, right now I need you to go brush your teeth. Okay, you brush your teeth. Okay, now now go put on your pajamas. So very short instructions, not many tasks at once. Positive reinforcement. So they get something out of their accomplishments. So you might reward them. Oh my gosh, you did your chore. Here's a sticker. And they get something that is affirming their accomplishments. Predictable consequences, meaning they know what is going to happen if they don't accomplish something. So if they don't finish their homework, they don't earn their iPad time. So they might, say, okay, tomorrow, if you do your homework, make sure you finish it because you want to watch iPad or YouTube, so making sure that they know what they earn or what they don't earn. Taking breaks. So if they're doing homework and they have 30 minutes of breaks, maybe every 5 minutes or 10 minutes, they get up, stretch, and then they continue. Sleep support, so making sure they get basic needs met, like sleeping and eating, so that so that their brain can be regulated and taken care of. And then collaborating with the school staff. So if there is problems coming up, you do want to work with teachers and principals and school districts to make sure that they're getting the academic support that they need. The most helpful message I've found is your child is not giving you a hard time. They might be having a hard time, and it's difficult for you. Next slide. So, things I want you to remember as parents and caregivers and families is ADHD is real. It is something that we have researched and have evidence that it is a mental health disorder. It's neurodevelopmental, so it's definitely something that's rooted in brain functioning. It is manageable. We have found that kids, young people and people of all ages with support can manage the challenges. It's different at each age. It's more than just high energy, and it's not caused by poor parenting or poor family life. Children with ADHD need understanding, they need structure, they need advocacy, they need someone who's there to support them and trying to understand them and help them. And they need connection. They need people that support them and that understands that when they need help and when they're doing really well. Important. What I usually recommend, when I'm working with families with children and adolescents with ADHD is definitely consult with school about academic difficulties and challenges. School districts may have the resources to support students academically, and socially and emotionally. I typically do recommend a psychoeducational or neuropsychological assessment. If this isn't accessible to everyone, you may meet with your pediatrician or doctor to talk more about this, um, and um, and they might be able to help understand what's going on a little bit more. Psychiatrists might be able to provide evaluations, which they can, and psychiatry is generally ones who provide medication for ADHD, which is one of the treatments for ADHD. Parent management training, getting support as parents to learn how to do some of these things, providing structure, how to help your kid, how to connect with your kid. Behavioral therapy can help. It can help the kid learn some skills and learn how to manage their emotions when they're feeling frustrated, and asking for help and relying on the support that they have. And then executive functioning coaching, which isn't for everyone, but it does help with improving executive functioning skills like planning and organizing and accomplishing tasks. Next slide. All right. So I know I said a lot and I tried to just provide as much information, um, but I would like to hear some questions.
Dr. Lazo, so I don't see any questions in the chat, but I do see a couple of, well, at least one raised hand. So I'm not sure if perhaps there's an issue with the chat feature, which is unusual. I haven't had that issue before, but it is unusual that we don't have any questions in the chat. So I'm
Okay,
going to unmute some of the individuals who are raising their hands, and then we'll take those
sure.
questions that way.
Sure.
Tammy, go ahead.
Yes, how common is it for someone to have been a great student as an elementary student, and then in sixth grade they now have to go to six different classrooms and teachers, and then the symptoms start showing up? How how common is that?
I don't think it's as common to have no clue that there were problems prior to that. I think that what usually comes to mind when this question does come up, when we have families who are like, "Gosh, middle school hit and like things became so much more difficult." What I find is that it's they were able, because of their functioning, even with maybe having been diagnosed with ADHD, their functioning and executive functioning skills in elementary school were at level relative to peers. And when demands increased, when they had to navigate multiple classes, several different subjects that were more difficult, that's when the challenges started to show up. So it really has to do with like the demands, where they may have been able to function and kind of fly under the radar, just because they were able to manage the demands in elementary school. And then as they jumped and made that big leap in the level of difficulty and demands, as well as navigating unique social situations, it begins to show and come to the surface.
Thank you. We do have one question in the chat. What advice do you give to parents on when to start medications for ADHD?
Yeah, my opinion, my own personal professional opinion is that, this is something that has to be a family decision. What we do know is that medication management is the first and highest effective treatment for ADHD, but that is a personal choice. So, to answer your question, I think what I always tell parents, those or families, those who are ready and wanting to initiate medication management for ADHD, and those who are against it, and maybe they're interested in knowing more information, is It's always helpful to just inform yourself. So to speak with a medical doctor, whether it's their pediatrician or a child psychiatrist or adolescent psychiatrist, and just get more information and get as much information so that you feel comfortable making the decision. Of course, psychiatrists might say, this is what they need for ADHD. I haven't come across a psychiatrist that has guilted or forced families to do medication management, but it is, a helpful treatment. And I just tell families, as long as you feel like you've gotten the information to make whatever decision it is you want. So I would seek as much information and get to know like the most you can out of medication management. And then once you make that decision, you can continue to understand how it works.
Next, we have a question from Crystal. Crystal, you're unmuted. Okay, next we'll try Brenda.
Hi, yes. My question is ADHD always hand by hand with depression and anxiety, or does it vary?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Does ADHD always come with depression and anxiety?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we do find that young people and adolescents with ADHD, especially those without uh, support or without help, do could be at risk for developing anxiety and depression. This is the most simplest way I can say it is when they feel like they are having so much trouble and difficulty with the symptoms of ADHD, they begin to feel so sad about the past and how they didn't do well in school and they didn't make friends or they were constantly blamed for their behaviors. And so they can develop depression. And then anxiety could be their worry about the future. Am I going to improve? Is this going to continue? Am I ever going to get help? And so, yes, to answer your question, we do see that anxiety and depression can develop. Or, there could be complex individuals who are who tend to or who are vulnerable to anxiety and depression, where they that can exist with the ADHD.
Okay,
But
thank
there are children and adolescents who have shown that they don't develop anxiety and depression.
Thank you. Next, we have Koi.
Yes, hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The chat is not working, by the way.
Okay, thank you for letting me know.
Yeah. So you were talking about like the teens and you were describing a lot of like their symptoms. Now my son is 7 years old. He's 8, sorry. He's 8, he's gonna be 9 years old. And a lot of what you describe is in my 8-year-olds. Is that something I should be concerned about? Or like what is the age for what you were
Yeah.
describing in the teens?
I know it's sort of the big umbrella, like, oh my gosh, like this sounds like any kid, right? And this is what I tell families, like, yes, we could see we could at some point our kids have done, some of this or gone through some of these challenges. I usually advise families to become concerned when there's a impairment in any of their functioning. So what I
Okay.
mean by impairment in any of their functioning, usually I break it up into 3 or 4 categories: academic, social, daily, and emotional. So if you're finding that they're struggling in school, but they're fine socially, they have friends, they're not getting into a ton of conflicts, they're not, you know, arguing with you or the teacher, they're not they're fine. They do their chores and everything, and they're emotionally regulated. They're not having a lot of outbursts or tantrums. Then yeah, there might be something going on at school. But if there's multiple functioning that's being affected, then there might need to be a concern. And like I said at the beginning, it can't just be at home. It's not like if it's just happening at home, there might just be some dynamics that's happening at home
Yeah.
or a family stressor that's happening. But if it's happening at school, at home, at soccer, at theater camp, it's like, okay, we definitely see a pervasiveness that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. Next we have A. Garwal.
Yes, hi. My question is this always like a binary diagnosis? Either it's there or it's not there, or is there a spectrum where kids could be demonstrating symptoms at home, but doing really well at school?
Yeah, that's the challenge. And like I said, yes, in order to receive the diagnosis, the assessor or the person who is diagnosing, it does have to be a criteria to be showing these symptoms across different settings. And some symptoms might be more obvious in certain settings, like at home, they're relaxed, or families don't really need them to do a lot of tasks or demands. So they kind of just do their homework and they're fine. They watch TV, they don't give you a lot of problems. But at school, they face a lot more demands, a lot more tasks. So you might see it more at school, but it is a criteria to be able to see some level of symptoms in every setting. But like I do agree with what you said, like it might not appear. And we do get a lot of kids that the school's like, they're doing fine, they're getting good grades, and you're at home and you're like, but I'm like stressing spending hours trying to get their homework done. And that's a challenge because the schools do have to see impairment in academics to provide support. But the kid might be so motivated just to maybe do well so that they don't feel bad that they're doing so well in school and then they're stressed out at home. So it is a bit of a spectrum and there are reasons why. But there are ways to assess whether these symptoms are significant.
And our final question for this evening will be Andrea Vernarova.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Uh-oh, you're sorry, you're cutting out.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, for some reason I don't have a good signal in my own house. But I wanted to say what a great presentation. Very much. I wish that I was listening to this about 4 years ago when one of my twins was diagnosed with the severe ADHD with impulsivity, and I was just lost. I didn't know what it means, what's going to happen, what to do,
Yeah.
like, it was just such, it's great that you guys are doing that. I appreciate it. We now are more comfortable with the diagnosis. We now understand that I likely have it too. We renamed it that it's attention dialed to higher dimensions
Okay,
because
great. I
he
like that.
feels.
Yeah.
I do too. I do too. And we went through, one thing that I learned as a parent and as a single mom, his symptoms were the strongest during the time when I was falling apart the most.
Mm,
And once I healed and I seeked for myself and I calmed down, your children emotions are kind of very linked to you as a caregiver. So like he calmed down way more also.
mm,
And I realized that because it's not interfering with his social emotional development, I am kind of almost letting go of the academic part of it. I'm
mm.
thinking, okay, he's going to catch up to that as long as he doesn't feel
Sure.
left out. Like he doesn't feel like he doesn't belong or once if that happens and it's gonna be hurting his feelings, we will reconsider the medication.
Yeah.
The reason why I took him off it was, well, we had some bad experiences with, one of which he had nightmares. The second one, he was not only not losing weight, but also, I mean, not gaining weight, but he was losing weight. That's
Mhm.
how significantly his appetite dropped.
Yeah.
And I just decided, like, no, I want him to be him. I'll support him. I started volunteering in the school, the teachers' dynamics, and the realize that he's not the only one. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
That it's almost a pandemic nowadays, where so many children are experiencing that. And
Yeah.
like the biggest help we had was in me being regulated, and he's picking up the regulation off of me, and sometimes
Yeah.
even teaches me, like, mommy, take a deep breath.
Yeah. Well, thank you for
Yeah,
sharing.
but
Yeah.
it's
And I
very
think,
helpful. Thank you.
yeah, I think you mentioned something that's really important, and I'll close with that, is that social support is crucial. You know, it is common. We're seeing it be more common, and I think getting support in some shape or form, whatever is accessible and available to you and your family and your children, is making sure you get the social support, because that is a huge factor in functioning with ADHD. Yeah.
Well, thank you
Okay.
very much for your time this evening, Dr. Lazo. We had over 100
Yep.
attendees in the webinar this
Oh,
evening,
wow.
and I do apologize for the chat situation. So I'll have to investigate that myself to find out what happened this evening with that, to make sure that for future webinars those questions are rolling in throughout. But again, we do want to thank Children's Health Council and Dr. Lazo for the information. We will be sharing the webinar in the following days with everyone so that you can refer back to it. And our partnership with Children's Health Council, I hope will continue next year. So we're looking forward to continue partnering with them next year to continue providing information on a variety of topics. We had the autism webinar that we had to reschedule for the fall. I know there were a lot of questions from parents and from staff with regard to that one. So we will be bringing that back in the fall, as well as some additional topics that we hope to share with families. So thank you again to all families for joining us this evening. Thank you again, Dr. Lazo. Thank you,
Of
Jenny.
course.
Thank you, Rosalba, for interpreting. And we hope everybody has a wonderful evening. We do have a webinar tomorrow on school transition, so we hope that families who are interested in that topic can join us there. So with that, good evening, and thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.